Welcome to the Black Belt Business Podcast. My name is Matthew Brenner, and today we're with John Cardinale. John started his first martial arts school at 19 years old and opened it up while he was a student in university. So today you're going to hear how he went from that transition from being a student and a business owner, and now his school consistently does in the $50,000 range each and every month. And you're going to see how, if you are thinking about starting a martial arts school, a lot of times people think they're too young or they don't have enough experience. You're going to see how he did it, so you can do the same thing too. So John, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So tell us, most people, when they start a business, they might start it after college, maybe much later in their life, in their 30s and 40s, and they have more experience. Your story is completely different. You started very young, when you were 19. So how did that even happen?
Yeah, great question. So I started training in martial arts when I was 5 years old, and I trained all throughout adolescence. But the business part of it was not something that I was involved in. I know for some people in our organization, at least very young, they're involved pretty early. So for me, that wasn't the case at all. I loved competing, I loved training, but and the teaching and business part of it was never a thing. But I was still getting the skills of kind of how to do it. And growing up in a martial arts school, I kind of, the way that things go a little bit more than others. You get the culture a little bit better. And then when I was 17, my sister graduated, went off to college. Maybe I was 16. And then a couple of instructors ended up leaving. And there was an opening. And the head instructor at the time asked me, hey, do you want to teach? I thought to myself, yeah, definitely. And then the entire time after that, I was this is not for me. This is just something I'm doing because I like karate and I also like making money.
But you weren't yes, you did martial arts since you were a kid. And yeah, you loved it. But a lot of times people who do martial arts, they don't always do other sports, but you played football at the same time.
Yeah, I did wrestling in middle. I played other sports all throughout childhood. There was never just, I'm just doing martial arts. So I did football for 6 years. I did wrestling for a year. And then literally every sport you can think of, baseball, lacrosse, most other sports. I played soccer.
So what made you feel like you could have martial arts as a career? Because you sound like you didn't want to do it. You're this is cool. You taught for a little bit. Maybe you have fun, but I think you were competitive, on the demo team and tournaments. So what made you decide, or before we even get to that, what made you feel like it wasn't for you?
I guess I didn't see the opportunity. I think for most people, if you say I'm going to go teach martial arts, it's what? At least professionally. And I know
what else do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Right? What else do you do? Or that's the only thing. Yeah, that's what you got stuck with. It's not this great badge of honor. It's yeah, you teach martial arts.
Yeah.
And my instructor, your brother, Mr. B, I think at the time we just didn't have as good of vision casting. So I knew he did really well for himself, but I didn't really know there was opportunity elsewhere. And I know Sensei Michael did well and Mr. McCreary. And although you're only 6 years older than me, there wasn't a lot of interaction between us. If it was I'm the little, the interaction was you're the little kid and you're the teenager who's only here every once in a while.
Yeah.
So I just didn't get to see that vision that, owning a martial arts school could be really awesome. I knew your brother crushed it, but I didn't think there was opportunity there. And it wasn't until I saw you open your school and then I saw you kind of get to the other side of the first 100 students, that struggle, how challenging it is to open a school at the beginning. And you were able to buy a house super young. You were going on awesome vacations. You lived this awesome life. And I looked at you and I was I know martial arts. I know how to teach this. And that guy lives a pretty awesome life. I think I could do that. And I want to be have that life.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because a lot of times people see martial arts career as something you do when you're older. Mm-hmm. Right. And for you and I, we started when we were young, we did it as kids. And even though we did it as kids, we didn't necessarily see it as a career until someone showed us that vision, like you said. And for me, obviously, it was my brother. And even though he opened up schools and he was a martial arts entrepreneur, and even though it was right in front of me, I still couldn't see it. Right. 100%. I needed someone to spell it out for me. And it's funny, we were at a seminar a couple weeks ago and I heard a really good quote that I loved. And it said your nose is only an inch from your mouth, but you still need someone else to tell you your breath smells. Mm-hmm. Right. So sometimes you just need someone else to, even though something's in front of you and it's obvious, you need someone else to tell you.
Yeah. Right? And just like a kid too, the things that you glamorize that we know now, aren't that awesome of wearing a suit every day, going to work in some fancy high-rise building. That all sounded really cool and important at the time too.
So when you decided to, or you saw me, okay, so I opened up, I was 6 years older than you, and I opened up a school, went through the struggle, but then I was like the young person, right? Everyone else was like kind of like older people that ran schools in their 40s and 50s, but I was like that young person. And then obviously I saved up money and I bought a house and, I went to travel all around. And as a young person, like that's what you care about. You see other people buying a fancy house or living, going cool places. Like, yo, dude, I want to do that. Right. So what made you think that just because I did it, you could do it?
I think that's just like part of who I am is like, oh, I can learn it. Like, hey, this isn't that complicated. I looked around and I think we have a lot of really smart people in our organization, but I also was talking to some of the people who, some of them aren't even involved in action karate anymore. And they kind of told me their workflow. And my thought was like, hey, I bet you if you can do this, if your brother believes in me, if Miss Jackie, his business partner, believes in me, like I might not believe it. Like I definitely had some imposter syndrome, but the way I was able to work myself through that was like, okay, if these people are telling me I can do it, if I'm looking around and like success is all around, if you follow it and do what you're supposed to do, I bet you it'll work out.
Yeah. Success leaves clues.
Exactly.
Right. So when you decided to, how did you go from like, okay, I'm teaching here to like, oh, I'm going to open up a school?
Yeah, great question. So at the time I was working at a pizza place called Jules Thin Crust. And
how's the pizza there?
It was pretty good. It was all
Do
like
you eat
fancy.
there now? Like, would you go there and be like, oh, I'm going to have a slice or a pie or no? No. Okay.
I feel like now we're spoiled by like Angelo's or something like really good or like Pizza John. But at the time, like also this is like the suburbs. So there's not as much like gourmet type pizza. So I'm working there. And at the time I'm making like 12 or 13 plus tips. And I'm like, oh,
what were you doing? You delivery driver?
No, I'm just behind the counter. Like you cut the slice, you put the slice in, like they have like a little reheat oven and then you like hand it to the customer. So you're pretty much like the front and then there's like chefs in the back.
Okay.
And that was like a super easy job. Like it's a bunch of like me hanging out with a bunch of like my friends. I had 2 best friends who worked there and a bunch of girls, all my age. So it was just like a really fun experience. And at first I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I'm making $12 plus tips. I am like crushing it right now. Because at karate at the time I was making like $8.50.
Okay.
And I then
slave labor, working the lines.
Of course. So then I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I was like, oh crap. I am like, someone else is getting really rich off of me sitting here, cutting this pizza, putting it in that little oven and giving it to someone. And then I asked your brother, like, hey, I want to do more in action karate. Like, I get that there's opportunities here. And even if it was, hey, I was not all in on karate. I wanted to go away to college, but I was like, hey, I think I could do more, make more here. Cut out Jules, just do this. So at the time it was, okay, there's a failing school. We're going to invite him here. We'll have you guys like meet. We'll take class together. We'll all go out to lunch together. And then you'll go and be his enrollment director and we'll pay you $20 an hour. I was like, boom, I'm really like on fire now. He showed up late the first time. And it was like a super wacky guy. He had like legitimately 3 students at the time. And my conversation with your brother, Mr. B, was you're starting from scratch. So like realize that.
This wasn't someone from within our organization. This is someone from outside.
Someone from outside. I don't remember his name. It was like some old guy who had a school in New Jersey.
Okay.
So, and then the first time I was like, okay, we'll give him like the benefit of the doubt, which I think is not even how we roll anymore. But at the time, like this was a whole new thing. Second time showed up like an hour and a half late, like not like 2 minutes walking there, like an hour and a half late. And it was like, okay, that's not going to happen. And then we shifted that to, hey, I'll be like the co-head instructor at Feasterville, like the main school at the time, and kind of take from, okay, that's not opening, but you can be the co-head instructor here. And I came in to talk to Mr. B and Miss Jackie about like the details of what that is. He said like, hey, I think I have something you're going to like better. And then he said like, you could do this, or you could open your own school, and then kind of like broke down the numbers of what that would look like if the school was grossing 30,000, how much I could about make, or 40 or 50.
Can you go run through that for us? Like how much does a person generally make if the school's doing 30,000 or 40,000 or 50,000?
Totally. So I'm going to start with just the instructor payroll. So the way that it works as an owner, obviously like an LLC, you have like 2 different hats. The first is like you're paying yourself for working there. And then you get your profits. So I had 2 business partners. So we'll start with just what I would have paid myself. So in our organization, it's 30% at 30,000. So the payroll is 30% of 30,000, which is $9,000 at that level. And then normally the 2 full-time people split that. And then anyone who's like a part-time-ish instructor, just you cut up like their piece and they get their payroll and it comes out of that big total pie. At 40,000, that percentage of 30 stays exactly the same. So then that is 15, I believe, somewhere around there. And even at the time when I heard like, oh, you'd be making 45 grand, like remember, I'm going from $12 an hour. I was like, oh my goodness, I'd be really crushing it. And then when I heard the number of 50, I was like, just from our instructor payroll, I was like, that's amazing. I'm not going to get what that number is for 30% of 50. But in general, like it's, keep building the payroll up. It's capped at 30. And then, you get your percentage of the profit. So in my school, I own 49%. So I get a little less than half of all the profits. And I was able to like talk to another owner at the time who also owned 49%. And his school did like very low 30s. And he told me like, oh, I'm taking home like 12 grand a month. And I was like, hey, and this guy also told me his hours that he was working. He's like, I show up at 2:30 and then teach till like 7 or 8. And I was like, and he's pulling in 12 grand. I was like, I think if I put in more hours, I could do more than that. And even if I just did 13, that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah. And you have like two different sources of revenue in that situation. The one source of revenue is you're an employee there because you're the head instructor, right? Mm-hmm. And with the head instructor, we do revenue sharing where you get a piece of however well the school does, you get a piece of that, right? Yeah. So it's almost like being an owner without like the headache.
Exactly.
Then there's another part of it where if like, oh, you own the business, then you also get a piece of the profits of the business. So what's left after the expenses. So those are two different buckets I also wanted to distinguish. In your situation, you're working there as an employee and you also had ownership in the business, but you didn't just get ownership, right? You had to like purchase equity into the business in order for it to open. So how much did you invest money to become an owner?
Yeah, great question. So obviously I'm a 19-year-old. I'm a freshman in college. So it's not like I have this like vast pool of savings to pull from. So at the time I had like 10 grand in savings.
Wait, you didn't have like a ton of bar mitzvah money left over?
I missed that boat. So I had like 10 grand in savings from like working at karate, working at, the pizza place that I just like saved up over time. And then I went to Wells Fargo, gave them my whole spiel at 19 about like this whole business. And they said, we'll give you $1 grand. Which obviously I was like, okay, that doesn't even help me at all. Like that gets me nowhere. And I really probably needed, the expenses would probably be like 40 to 60 grand. And we were going to run it pretty lean because I didn't have any expenses. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a house. Like I was living at home with my parents.
And you weren't paying for college?
So I was not paying for college. I was at community college at the time. Okay. So the rule was in my house, like, hey, we're going to pay for community. Where you go next, you have to pay for it. And if you fail a class, we're not paying for it again. And community college was generally inexpensive. It was like $2,500. And I ended up even getting some scholarships to make it like less than $2 grand a semester. So, I really appreciate my parents, but I also tried to do as much as I could to make it as affordable as possible. So I talked to my parents. After the first time I had this conversation with your brother, Mr. B, I told him like, no, I don't think this is the right time. Then, the action karate.
What made you feel like it wasn't the right time?
It was hard for me to commit to like wanting to be in the Philadelphia area forever. Like for me, I really wanted to go to college out of state. And then
you couldn't get in anywhere else probably.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So keep going.
So I really wanted to go to college out of state. And it was like, obviously that, hey, if you open a school, like you're not going to leave a year in, like that doesn't make any sense at all. Like this is your business now and you're in charge of it. So I was like, I don't know if I can make that commitment. And then your brother told me, if you wait, which you totally can, 3 years from now, you're going to come, we're going to do this. And you're like, I wish I started earlier. And if you do it now, when you graduate college, you'll be like, oh, I'm 3 or 4 years ahead of where I would have been.
Yeah.
And for me, that like FOMO was like enough to push me over the edge. So then I go with my parents that night. I'm like, Mom and Dad, again, I'm 19. I'm still living at home. This is not even, I'm like finishing my first semester of college. So like, we're not settled in. We're like really just still figuring everything out. I have this great idea. I'm going to open a business, but I need help. And my dad was like, my mom and my dad both said automatically, no way. Of course, you're not doing that. Not that we don't believe you could do it. Like we've seen you teach. We actually like think this would be a really good opportunity for you long term. But you're a kid right now. And we also want you to have like a college experience. And I told my parents, like my pitch back to them was, okay, I work 10 hours a week at karate already. And I work 20 to 25 hours a week at Jules. I'm already doing 30 to 35 hours. Why don't I put all of that energy into one thing? And it's really not that big, much more. It's not like I'm going from working 2 hours a week to now 40 to 50. It's like, hey, I'm already almost at full time. I think I could still do this. My dad's response was, we're not putting down all this money for you to have some part-time fake business for you to mess around with.
And to be fair, your dad trained too.
My dad was a black belt. He had coached like our demonstration team. My whole family were black belts. Like we had been involved in action karate for 15 years at this point.
And even him is like, what was his job? What did he do?
He worked in IT.
Yeah. So he had a good IT job. And so he's not like some guy who doesn't really have anything going for him and doesn't understand. Like he has a professional career, does great. Your mom has a professional career too, outside of martial arts. At that time, she was outside of martial arts. She was doing blinds, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like custom blinds and stuff. So even them who are black belts within the organization. They are working professionals. They didn't even see the vision and they just said no to you right away, even though you're doing it your whole life. How did you, because there's always like, even right now, there's always people like teenagers that come to me and like might want to be interested and their parents may or may not be supportive, but like, there's always a part of them that thinks, oh, I'll do this later. I'll do this later. When all the stars align and things are perfect and everything makes sense, then I'll do it. But as you know, that never happens for most people, and they get stuck in mediocrity forever, right? They just keep on doing the same thing they've always done, and either have to get the same job that their parent had, or do something that their friend is doing, and they never get to live like an extraordinary life. So for you, like, how did you convince your parents?
Great question. And for me, part of like the internal sale was exactly that. We have some lesson of the week that we'll tell to our students about like, do you wait to start driving to California until all the lights are green? No, that's like the silliest thing you've ever heard. But how many times do you tell yourself like, oh, I'm going to start working out once I'm in better shape, or I'm going to start reading, taking care of my body once XYZ thing happens. It's you take a step, things aren't perfect. You take another step, things aren't perfect, and you keep moving forward. Okay, so back to that night in my parents' house. Then my dad says that comment to me. And this is when my dad and I are both like loud Italians. So there's lots of like hand motions. There's lots of like yelling going on. And for us, my mom will then be like, you're both yelling. We're like, we're not yelling. And I go, great. Being a stubborn 19-year-old, if you won't help me, I'll do it without you. And I walk out. And then I went to a friend's house and I went in the basement and I'm like explaining the whole thing to them. And they all tell me I am the dumbest person they have ever met. And they can't believe I'm thinking about doing this. So I'm like, all right. I'm stubborn. You're not going to sway me. I'm just sharing my story. So then I leave.
Wait, but what made you feel like you could do it even though your parents are telling you you can't and your friends are telling you you're dumb?
Well, I had really good role models of like, hey, I'm not making this up. They told me 1 out of 2/3 of all small businesses fail in 2 years, and then some funny statistic like that. And then another quarter of them or something, there's some outrageous number in 5 years of how many small businesses fail. I said, but I'm not figuring this out on my own. Like I just have to do what is already shown to me.
Follow the recipe.
Exactly. Like the success leaves the clues. I'm not making up all the systems. There's a phone script. Call the leads and say the words. Hey, here's how we do an intro lesson. Here's how we do enrollments. Here's how you teach classes. And I already knew how to teach classes. And I already got the culture part of it. So for me, it was all those statistics I don't think apply here. And at the time, there really hadn't been any action karates that hadn't followed the systems that went out of business. And that was like a big vote of confidence for me of like, hey, there has to be someone here. There's obviously people in the organization smarter than me, but there's got to be someone here dumber than me figuring it out, making it work. And if they can do it, I can do it. So I went to a friend's house. They were like, I can't believe you're going to do this. All the statistics about small businesses failing, how much money it was. And I was like, okay, this isn't like the environment. This isn't what I'm looking for. So I left. I'm sitting in my car and I call my mom and I'm like, okay, I want to come home. I want to talk to you guys, but I am standing pretty firm on this. Like, hey, if you won't help me, I totally respect that, but I'm going to figure out a way to do this and open.
You say help you mean give you money because
exactly.
Wells Fargo is giving you a grant.
Exactly. And when I say help me, so they took out a loan and then I had to pay them back.
They took out a loan from a bank?
Yeah, they put a home equity loan for $48,000.
Damn. So they put a loan out on their house.
Here's, I know it sounds so scary. Like it makes my stomach drop just like saying those words out loud. So in the moment it was terrifying, but here's how my parents ran it. And they were like, this is how it makes us comfortable. Either way, they're going to get paid back. If the business fails, if the business doesn't fail. And most parents, including my sister, like they got help for student loans. They're like, we're not helping you for student loans. This is your help. And we expect you to pay us back. And I said, totally. If the business fails, I'll pay you back. If the business doesn't fail, I'll pay you back. Like 48 grand is a ton of money. But for most people, like, hey, that's the same thing of just going to college. Like, you don't know if you're going to graduate or not. And people take that out, no issues.
Yeah. And for going to college, I always think about it like, okay, good. You go to college, you spend, let's say 48 grand in tuition, which will be it's way higher than that. No, way higher than that. Probably close to double. Or if you go to like a out of state school or a private school, that's going to be quadruple that. Yep. Right. So if you go and do that, there's like a chance you get a job afterwards, right? Like and that chance of getting a job is probably not a high paying job for a while, right? At least here with like you open your own business, you swing the bat, at least you have a chance of hitting a home run, exactly. Right? And of course, after college you can, but if you just like get a regular job at whatever place is hiring local college graduates, you're not going to be making a great income. You're going to be making like whatever, graduates make. And then like eventually you might work your way into a great income. It's not like it's impossible, but like, why not go up to bat like for yourself and your own systems and control the entire process along the way, as opposed to just following the paved path of whatever school told you to do. But did your parents say that you had to be in school also at the same time, or could you just have not done school?
That was part of the agreement. And for them also, like, hey, I'm someone, I kind of like to hedge my bets. So my thought also was, hey, if I can get through college, and worst case, if I get through college, this business doesn't work out, but I've paid through college along the way, sounds good. Yeah. Like, hey, I got a degree. I don't have any debt from like going to college, and I'll pay my parents back, and it's all good. Like, that's the worst case. So for me, that was also like a hedging of my bets.
Okay. So you took out a $48,000 loan.
Yeah.
Were you like shitting yourself?
Yeah.
Especially as a teenager, at $48,000, like it sounds like $1 billion.
Yeah, inconceivable amount of money. So I said this earlier, and I was trying to get back to it. Is like, so we took out I had the 48 from my parents. I had 10 from my personal, and then our build out ended up being like 200 grand, like just under like 180. So those numbers don't add up to half of 180. So pretty much every day I just busted my ass, like constantly of like, hey, this has to work. Your parents' house is on the line right now. And obviously, like, hey, my parents are pretty well off. The world wouldn't have exploded, but that pressure, I think, was like good at many points of like making me work super hard. So, we used the 48. I ended up getting down to like $2,000 in my savings because I also wasn't paying myself to try to like get some more sweat equity. And we were in a church like 1 block away all summer teaching, trying to get people in the door. And luckily and unluckily, our construction took forever. Like the permitting with the city of Philadelphia was horrible. One of the walls in our space was going like this and like warped and pushing in. And if you listened closely and like there was nothing going on, you could hear like as it was moving.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, horrible. So that was like a big part of it. And the lucky part is it took so long, and I obviously hated teaching. Like, I'm in the August heat in Philadelphia. It's 80 or 90 degrees. Everyone's in full uniform at a belt test on hardwood floors. No AC, where we have like a couple of like old church fans that were using to like move the air around. We built up a big student base in the time though. So when we finally did move in and we started having like rent, we had a pretty big student base. We had some revenue coming in. So we got out of the red pretty quickly.
Okay. So how long did that take you to get out of the red?
We had 100 students in under 6 months. We had, I said, like 5.5.
Okay, cool. So at that time, how long did it take you to pay off the loan like completely?
My parents are super generous. I've been paying them $1,000 a month for many months. I paid them back like 3 or 4 months ago, and it's done.
Okay. So how many years ago? How many years was that?
Took about just under 5.
Just under 5 years. Okay. And I'm sure you could have paid it back sooner, but you just like did it slow because they probably weren't sweating it.
Yeah. My parents, there was times where, hey, for me spending $500 a month on a loan, like especially in the beginning, was a lot. And then after that, it was, hey, I'm paying, I have to pay $20,000 a semester to Temple. So that really like boiled my blood of, hey, I could pay you guys back in real fast, but I'm going to send this money to Temple and I'll give you guys $1,000 every month. And for my parents, they were very relaxed about it. Like, the business started making money pretty quick. They didn't need the money. Sometimes I would give them like a $5,000 or $10,000 check, just like, hey, I want to move this whole thing along faster. But there was no pressure from them, which I was very like thankful and lucky for.
So when I took out a loan for the first school, it was $80,000, and it took me, I think, about 40 years. And I remember when I didn't have that payment anymore, it was like the greatest thing ever. It was like, oh my God, all this money is leaving my bank account every month, and now it's not. But the same thing, it was like, my family gave me a loan, my brother gave me a loan, and it put a lot of pressure on me. So if I didn't pay that back, you're going to feel like an a-hole, right?
Yeah.
So this is while you're in school, right? So you worked at a church for a little bit while they figured out the construction of the building. What was your day-to-day like? Like, how did you, like, you're in class, and when he says Temple, by the way, if you're listening, it's Temple University. It's a public university in Philly. So how did you like do school and the martial arts school at the same time?
I was really lucky that I didn't know what it was supposed to be. And I say that in the sense of I would wake up at 7:30. I was also super lucky. I live with my parents. My mom is literally a saint. So she would like make me breakfast. I would come downstairs. I would eat as fast as I could. And I would go to a community college at the time.
You eat super fast.
I do.
Like if I'm eating a meal with you, I'm like 6 bites in and you're done.
Listen, I'm on a mission. So I would eat my breakfast super quick, go to community college. While I'm sitting there, I'm like reading a professional development book in between business classes about some form of how to win friends and influence people, or the millionaire next door. And take the classes. While I'm in the classes, my phone is on, the ringer's on. I've already told my teachers like, hey, I'm opening a business. If the phone rings, I really need to take it. I would constantly step out, make calls, take calls. And then the second I got done at like 11, I would go straight to Manayunk, which is about an hour drive. So from Bucks County to Philadelphia. And then I would work until like 9 or 10 and probably take like a 30-minute lunch break. And what I mean earlier, when I was like, I didn't know what it was supposed to be, I remember calling your brother and being like, how many hours are we supposed to work? Because my employee at the time needs to take like 2 or 3 hours for lunch and to rest. And that doesn't seem right to me. I thought like, oh, you're supposed to work 12 hours every single day and, make it work.
Right. Well, when you're young, you for the most part should.
100%.
Right? Like just work as much as you can in your 20s and 30s. So you can chill in your 40s and 50s.
Exactly.
Right?
But it was like I was really grateful at the time. I was like, I just had that expectation of, oh, this is just going to be a million hours. There was no like, oh, I'm going to need a 3 or 4 hour break during the day. So every day it was leave the house at 7:30, get back at like 9:30 or 10, and then start doing some homework.
Where did you get that discipline from? Because most college kids and high school kids are lazy as hell. So where did you get discipline come from?
I don't know. I say that like, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I didn't do that great in high school. I only had like a barely above a 3 GPA, and I mostly was interested in just like having fun. But I think that saying that you said of like work super hard in your 20s and then you can live an awesome life in your 30s or 40s really stuck with me, as well as the pressure of, hey, when I go home at night to my parents whose house is on the line and they ask me how the business is doing, I better have some good news for them.
And what about with your friends? Like, did you have friend time, or like, did you still go to parties in school, or like, how did that work?
Yeah. So in community college, at least at mine, there's no parties. There's no socialization. Like I actually have a couple people that like I know from community college, like 2 or 3, but most people it's you go to class, you go home. That's it. There's no like socialization. And every once in a while you'll have someone in class you like, but there's like 2 or 3 people I follow on Instagram and I'll like give them a like, or if they're working on something like a business, I'll try to support them, but knowing that I'm close with them. And there was no parties or friends for, I would say probably like the first 6 months. And I would maybe see my friends once a month.
Mm. And then did you feel like you were missing things? Did you feel like you were behind? Like what was your feelings at the time?
So at the time I had a girlfriend. So I didn't really feel like I was behind, because if I had free time, it was just easier to like, rather than coordinating 4 or 5 people, hey, I'm just going to go hang out with her at the end of the night. Once we broke up, there was a little part of me that was like, oh, I wish I got to do some of like the more college kid things of like having less stress. This was after the school was already successful.
So what was she saying at the time? Like she sees you opening up a business. You don't have a lot of time for her. I'm sure you have some time at the end of the night, right? And it's not like you work till 11 p.m. every single night, right?
100% not. Yeah.
No, I mean, you went from 11 a.m. in the morning to school till 11 a.m. and then you would go to the karate school and probably get home around 8 or 9 or something.
Remember, it's an hour drive back, so it would be more like 9 or 10.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because of the long drive. So how did you handle your relationship at the time?
So this is going to sound weird, but she was a high schooler. Like she was a grade below me. We went to high school together and we started dating before I started college. So for her, there wasn't like a lot of expectation of seeing each other during the day because she was still in high school. So I would come over to her house at night. Like remember, it's a school night for her.
I feel like you make it sound worse than it is. Like this is gonna sound weird. She's a high schooler. You
well,
this girl's you're younger than me, so she was still in high school.
Yeah. No, I felt super weird at the time. Like I remember opening the business and like I'm giving people advice on how to parent their kids, and I'm going to my girlfriend's prom next week. Like that. I was like, you can't tag me in any pictures. I because people can't know how old I am.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah.
So I guess for your relationship with her, it didn't really matter because you wouldn't see her till nighttime anyway.
Yeah. And then we would see each other on the weekends. And I think also at the time, like based on where we were, like there was just less expectations. It wasn't like a mature, serious relationship where like we lived together or something like that.
And I remember when you started, or when you were trying to figure out whether you should start it or not, you like came up to me and had a couple conversations with me. Do you remember this or no? You don't remember this?
None.
Oh yeah, we've had I think one longer conversation and like I think another like shorter one where you'd ask me about it. You'd ask me like what it's like doing it professionally. Like you never asked me outright how much money I make, but I remember you asking me like how I can afford the things I was doing. And like I remember the conversation. Like I can't remember where
were we at like a tournament?
I don't think so. I think we're somewhere else. We're at some event or something. And I remember that you were so eager to ask questions. And in fact, to the point where it's like kind of annoying, where you just wanted to shut up and you ask question after question after question. But I was like, almost like a little annoyed, but also so happy that you were like smart enough to ask the questions. And then when I talked to my brother, I was like, he's going to do well because he actually like thinks critically and like wants to know the answer to these questions and not just going at it blind. And he's going to ask questions of himself in his own business. So I know he's going to be good at it. And I was excited because like, oh, someone else young doing it, right? Like I was like the young stud at the time, like, and yeah, there were some other people who were younger, like Sensei Michael was younger too, but he was kind of like, he started before me. I mean, he's still younger, right? He's a couple years older than me, but he's still younger.
Got it.
Right?
I thought you were saying he's younger than you. I was like,
no. He's a little older than me, a couple years older. But still, he'd been in martial arts for so long. He was almost like the old man of martial arts, right? Even though he was younger. So seeing like you seeing me do it, now you do it, I was like, oh, cool. I'm the young guy. I'm like 21, 22, and now you're like 19 doing it. I'm like, damn, like he's really starting young.
Yeah.
So it was a cool kind of experiment to see on the side and just like how inquisitive you are. So at what point did you feel like the school was like successful? Like, was there a certain number you got to? Was there a certain feeling? Like, when did you feel like, okay, I did what I need to do. I'm so happy I did this. This is great.
I think when we got to $30,000 in reoccurring revenue every month, like I was like, I can breathe. And that's when I felt like pretty good of like, hey, we got there. And then I think like part of my personality, honestly, is I feel like the goalpost is always kind of moving. That's something I'm always trying to work on, of like enjoying the moment and being grateful for where you are. And it's okay to want more, but not being, oh, well, I got here but I'm not there. And like not having that internal talk. So I think when we got to 30, I was pretty like, okay, we can do this. And even like along the way, when we got to 100, I was like, I got this. I know what I need to do more of this, do it a little sharper. You're going to keep growing. And then we got to 30 and we kind of got stuck at 30 for a while. And that's when we kind of needed to like shake things up a little bit.
There's always going to be plateaus, right? There's going to be times you're doing great. Same thing with like lifting weights
100%.
Or anything. Like there's always going to be plateaus.
Yeah. And at the time I didn't understand that part of the plateau was spending 4 hours a day in class and an hour or two doing homework. I remember I was talking to Sensei Michael and he was like, once you graduate, your 100% focus is going to be on this. I can guarantee it's going to grow. And I was like, I don't know how it's going to grow. I feel like I'm giving all my mental energy to it, even though I'm spending time elsewhere. And obviously he was right.
Yeah. When I talk to other martial arts school owners, when I take them on as clients for Double Your Dojo, like when I help them grow their martial arts school when they're outside of our territories, I would say 9 out of 10 times, I will refuse to take on a client if they have another job. If they're working another job, I'll be like, it's not going to work for you until you get rid of that job and you just focus completely on this. There's no way you can get to where you want it to be, right? And I do have a couple who like tinker around here and there, but I'm always like, hey, just do this full time. You'll just make more money when doing what you love, as opposed to having one foot on first base, one foot on second base. You can't play like that.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating to see though, because that's what people.
It's like the obvious answer that they can't get to.
They can't get to. They just don't see it, right? So after your school got to 30,000, now you're making good money. You're making 6 figures coming out of college, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah. Low 6 figures. Still, that's amazing.
It's ridiculous. You're walking out of school with with a business that's giving you 6 figures in income, recurring, like immediately. Not like, oh, you work somewhere starting and then
let's pause though.
Yeah.
My senior year of college is COVID. So it's like, oh, this is so great. I'm crushing it. Boom, COVID, we're shutting it all down.
Got it. Damn. But that means also you're just stacking cash. Because like you can't spend it really.
Yeah.
In a way, right? Am I wrong about that?
No, you are right. Like eventually that ended up at like where I got to
how many friends do you have that were making 6 figures at the time?
Zero. Yeah. I none of my friends even got in it. So I started dating another girl who's my current girlfriend, Megan, while we were in college. And she was like, ask me what I do. And I was like, I'm going to tell you. I need you to have an open mind. And I promise that this all like makes sense at the end. I was like, I teach karate.
Wait, you told her this in the beginning?
In the beginning. I was like pretty upfront with her. And I went through a phase where I didn't want to tell girls. I was like, this is embarrassing. And then I was also going through a phase where I'm like, this is my life. It's going to be my life and nothing's going to change. So if you're not on board, sounds good. Like, that's fine with me. But, you know, it goes like when you're trying to impress girls at like some college bar.
Yeah. They're like, ooh, karate teacher.
You know,
fixing your eyebrows.
When you tell a girl like, oh, I'm in pre-med or something, like, okay, that's going to grease some wheels, get this conversation going. When you tell her like, oh, I teach karate every day to 3 to 8 year olds or whatever it is, like, you do what?
Yeah. Do you wear like makeup and a clown costume? Yeah, I remember being embarrassed about the same thing too. It doesn't make any sense, like logically, but you just have the idea of what is a good reputation job. Someone who works in finance or or you know, I don't know, real estate or whatever. Like those are always seen as like high esteemed jobs, but ours do not. And it's funny because like whenever I would always like especially when it comes to dating, I would always use the same one to kind of soften the karate school sort of thing. And they're like, oh, what do you do? And my first response was like, oh, like I'm an ass model. And they go like, what? I'm an ass model. And they like look at my butt, so I'm kind of cool and cute. But it was, A, I would do that as like a cute line, right? But B, it was also like some deflection of like, hey, this is not. And a lot of times like we wouldn't even get to what I actually do. And I was like, oh, if they like me and they don't even know what I do, they're really going to like me when they find out what I actually do, because it's really cool and I make good money and yada, yada. So being like, 6 years ahead of you, I was able to do some things that you figured out that you want to do just because I was like ahead of you in life, right? So I was making money before you and started the school before you. So you're able to see that and ask questions. And like one of the major things that you did that I was so happy you did is like you saved money and bought a house, right? And now you do like house hacking in your house. So for someone who's young and listening, well, tell us how you got your house and then like what you do now.
Yeah, totally. So during COVID, I did like the thing that everyone says to do of like live with a bunch of roommates, try to live super inexpensively. Like when I was in college, my first rent every month was $300 a month.
Wow.
And I lived with 5 people. My second rent was $600 and I lived with like 3 people.
Baller.
Oh my goodness. At the time I was like, I can't believe I'm spending this much money on rent. And now like I know what real rent is.
Yeah.
And then out of college for a year and a half, I lived with a bunch of friends in like this giant house, which I really liked. We each paid like $600 or $700. So it was the same thing. Like, hey, a bunch of people, we're all going to get in a house and live inexpensively. And I had the income to not do that, but I was trying to save for a house. So my goal was I had watched you do it. You purchase the house, you put 20% down. You fill the bedrooms beneath you and you make sure that the house is comfortable for you to live in. And then those roommates pay your mortgage. And if something comes up or if something happens, like you're good that way. And every year you really have like a second savings account of the principal. Like every year you have a forced savings account of that principal pay down. And whether you end up selling the house, whether you end up keeping it, like, hey, you're making money every year off of something that would normally be a liability.
Yeah, I remember explaining it to you, and for those that are listening, so you buy a house. You can't do this, by the way, if you're like married or have kids. Not really possible, unless you buy like a multi-unit, which is hard to find in a big city where it makes sense financially.
Or you're a straight wild card. Like if you live with your wife and kids in a house with roommates, you're a wild card.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that does that. So obviously, like single at the time, so you buy a house and then you just rent out the extra bedrooms, and you find like good people that you have good paying jobs. A lot of the people that I found is super interesting were people who recently broke up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and they wanted to live. I live in the city, so they wanted to live in the city, but they didn't want to get their own place because either they just like wanted to meet people. So I get people who were engineers or med students, so they're really respectful, easygoing, quiet. I think when I tell people that I had roommates, they'll be like, oh, where do you find them? Like your friends? Like, no, I never actually had never really had one friend I had as a roommate, but the rest were all from Craigslist, literally. And you just do a background check and you hang out, make sure you like them, and then they're all fine. Everyone has a professional job. Like they're going to live whatever life they want. And then every single month, those people are paying you rent, and then they're going to cover your mortgage, if not, and at the minimum. Right. It depends how many extra bedrooms you have and how much you can command from rent in a certain area. But for me at the time, after all expenses, so that includes like we'd have a cleaning service come in to make sure it's always clean. We would have, and I would make sure they were really clean too, because that would be disgusting. We had a cleaning service. We had the cable, like the best Wi-Fi I could purchase, like all like nice things that they would want to stay there and keep it nice. And even after all expenses, taxes and electric and utilities, I would clear like around $300 a month, $400 a month. So not only am I not paying $1,000 to $3,000 a month in rent, I'm living in the nicest bedroom in a nice house, and I'm making $300 a month. So it's like a plus, whatever, anywhere between $2,000 to $4,000 a month, because that would be something I'd be paying out. Otherwise paying rent somewhere else, right?
Yeah, you're also getting the appreciation in the house if it's in like, for you in Fishtown, like that's appreciated a ton, and you're getting principal pay down. and you can write off the interest on your taxes. So there's like a lot of
benefits.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So if you can do something like that, it's called house hacking. You can ask me or John over here. We're happy to help you. But it's like one of the best things I recommend to young people if they have the means and ability to do it. Get someone else. And there's so much freedom. Like I remember like you're asking me like how I travel, and like, yeah, the school was doing well financially, but it was also like I wasn't paying rent every month. So, okay, if you have an extra $1,500 a month,
yeah,
like you can travel pretty well as a single person. Like, okay, you travel every 3 months. Now you have $4,500 spent on vacation. That's a freaking lot for like a 20-year-old. Like you can ball out. Like, and I went to like Australia, and I went to Costa Rica, and I went to Panama, and like, you know, everyone else there for the most part was having their parents pay for it. I did like these guided tours, and for like young people in their 20s, and everyone else having their parents pay for it. But I was like, no, I pay for it. Like, so if you can house hack and live for free, I highly recommend it. Now it's actually the first time in my life where I'm living alone. I don't have any roommates, but I rented out my bedroom at my house, and now I'm actually paying rent, like a high rise, nice apartment. And it feels weird paying rent, but it's also like a different type of lifestyle, which I really, really enjoy. But anyway, so when you finally now you look back, all right. So how old are you now?
25,
and you started when you're 19. So you're 6 years in. When you look back on it, what do you think? Like, what goes through your mind? Like, I'm so happy I did it. Or are you like, I would have done some things differently? What goes through your mind?
I'm so happy I did it, and I would have done things differently. Like I know the mistakes that I made now. I wouldn't choose a different career, and I would still open the school, but I know what levers to pull at what times, like to make things go a little faster, to take out some like friction along the way.
Tell me what you would have done differently.
I had an employee at the time who wasn't a good fit. And the challenge was I was able to make up for 90% of the shortcomings and kind of like tee them up a lot of times for like sales. So I could do 90% of it, tee them up. They would get the sale, but a lot of it was wrong. Like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff was wrong, and I would just be fixing it. And I think I held on to that person for way longer than I should have.
That's common though for like all businesses, right? You have someone, you're scared to lose them.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna be stuck by myself. And I felt that feeling so many times, but it's funny because like once you make that decision, it sucks for like a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, but then it's so much better. Yeah. And you just hold on to it for dear life because you're like, who's going to teach classes? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? But when there's a vacuum and there's no one there, like someone's going to fill that vacuum, and you have a fire lit under your ass. It always ends up better afterwards. Right. And like, even with you and I remember I was talking with you about a conversation I was going to have with an employee, and I did. And it was like a very like straightforward, like not mean conversation, but like, here's exactly how I feel. And I'm just going to tell it to you because I don't want to hold it in. And like, we need to be open and honest. And I was just like very direct about this person's shortcomings. And you're like, damn, I can't believe you said that. I'm like, I can't believe it took me so long to say it. Like, it just sometimes like the hard decisions are the ones we put off the most. And like, if we just did it sooner, our mind would be so much more clear, and we'd have a less stress and anxiety, just like getting over making that tough decision.
At GymCon, they said, the life you want is behind a couple of tough decisions.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, a couple of tough conversations. And like, I 100% like that resonated with me. But when all this was happening, like I had loyalty to this person because they were my first employee ever. I'd been paired with this person. I'd like, again, I'm 19, but I had helped this person in ways. They had obviously helped me grow too. And then COVID was going on at the same time. So there was like a lot of stress going on. And this person at the end was like really taking advantage of me. To make it like a little personal, like I was like, obviously all the stress of COVID, is this all going to fall apart? Oh, this person who's my employee is taking like majorly advantage of me, causing so much stress in my life.
I remember you telling you to get rid of this person over and over and over again. And you're like, oh, I don't know, I think I'm going to try this. I think I'm going to try that. And I'm like, dude, just do it.
Obviously, the hindsight is
of course, I did the same thing.
Yeah. But I know for me, like it was so stressful. Like I started talking with a professional, like work through that stress of like, hey, you can't take advantage of me. That's not how this relationship's going to go anymore.
Like a therapist, you mean?
Yeah.
The therapist told you got to stick up for yourself?
I talked to the therapist after, like, as it was all falling apart. Like, hey, I was, the people who would coach me business-wise were your brother, you, Sensei Michael. So we had already decided, like, hey, we're moving on from this person. Or maybe it was like the day that I fired her. And I was like feeling so much guilt, shame, resentment towards this person, anger. I was like, I need to talk to a professional.
The first person that I fired, I cried my eyes out.
Yeah.
It was the most unprofessional thing ever. Literally tears going down my face. I was like, I don't think it's going to work. Thank God there was no one else there, but I actually cried like a baby.
I didn't cry when I fired my person. I was like pretty filled with rage because we had a conversation. You'd be too. We had a conversation of, hey, I want this to work. Do you think this is working? This isn't working for me. You can't no show. Like at the end, she just like wasn't showing up anymore. And it was, okay, if you no show again, you're going to be fired at will, which like disqualifies you from unemployment. And remember, this is like the heart of COVID where like unemployment's pretty insane. And she was like, okay, I promise I'm going to be there. Da, 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 da. Next day, no shows. And it's just like a phone call.
Yeah.
But then I talked with the therapist on the phone, like literally we were doing an intake call. And she was like, it sounds like you feel drained by this person. And like she said those words and it was just like tears and tears and tears and tears.
Wow, that's crazy. So since then, you and I have partnered together in another location where we both own a percentage of it. And we partnered up with employees that we both have that we feel like we know are going to be great fits for opening up a school, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how like that worked, how you and I ended up being now business partners in a location, why we did that, and like what's going on with that?
Yeah, totally. So, one of the ways to grow is like growing your leverage. Like, there's only so much that you can do in a day. If there's only 24 hours in a day, there's only so many hours you can work. And honestly, the martial arts has really helped me. My dream has always been like giving what I got to someone else. And there's a couple people in my school right now who I wanted to do that for. And I had 2 people, but like we were talking about before the podcast, like life gets in the way, things come up, it's easier to be mediocre and just like choose to not take that risk and take that jump. So I had one guy who still wanted to do it after things had already fallen apart with another person. And your brother kind of played matchmaker, and you had someone who was like a rock star who also wanted to do it and like connected us. We were already like really close friends, but I don't think we were even thinking like, oh, you have a person, I have a person, let's get together and make it work.
Are you sure he played matchmaker on that? Because I feel like I was going to team up with my sister and that didn't work.
We're talking about Graduate Hospital.
Oh, that was Graduate Hospital. Never mind.
That was after.
Yeah, that was after. Never mind.
Yeah, I don't know if your brother, maybe you asked your brother, like, hey, is there anyone in the action pie world in the fray?
Yeah, you're probably right, yeah. And then, so we run on a 2 full-time employee model, a head instructor and a program director, right? And the tough part is like always growing a business, having good employees, right? So we have these 2 people, one that could be the head instructor, one that could be the program director. You and I will split the cost. We'll have them invest in the business as well so they can get equity and then be able to make more money and they'll feel more anchored to the business. And that was was that a year ago?
A little over a year. So how we first started was we found a temporary location, like a rec center, and we opened pretty quickly. Your head instructor, Slackin, had a full-time job. Your person at the time decided they didn't want to do it. So she
didn't want to do it.
Quit the first day.
Yeah, I hired someone from another martial arts school. So this person was already a program director.
Sorry to interrupt. Pause. We're going back already. We had Miss Deja.
Someone else. Okay, yeah. All right, so I had 2 other people that didn't work out. So I had one person who is a still student at my school, amazing. She did it she started to do it. I don't know. We somehow started the process. She figured out it wasn't for her. All good. She's amazing. Just not for her, for the job. Then I was like, oh crap, Mr. John over here has someone. He has the head instructor. I gotta like have my other half. I gotta like contribute. So I ran a bunch of ads, did a bunch of interviews. I found someone who was already doing this position at another school that was successful, and she moved to
and we trusted the person who she ran the school with. Like it was someone like respected. Like we knew it wasn't some like funny karate situation where like she was kind of out on her own. Like we knew this guy was running like a pretty tight ship over there.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, this is like amazing. This person kind of fell into our laps. We do all the training for a couple of weeks. We go to start the job. She doesn't show up the first day. Literally just doesn't show up. I text her, hey, I don't know. I changed my mind. She did show up the first day. I showed up like 40 minutes late. And I'm like, is everything okay? What's going on? The second day she's supposed to show up. She didn't show up at all. She didn't show up the first day. Second day, she didn't show up at all. I text her and I was like, hey, is everything okay? Like, you don't seem like the person who would just not show up for work. If it's not a good fit for you, it's totally okay. Just let me know. I want to make sure that you're okay. It was literally the nicest text message ever. That obviously I didn't really feel any of those words. I really was just like, probably like rage. But I was like, I'm going to say the nice thing, be respectful, be overly nice. And she didn't respond. Right? I literally just ghosted and never responded after that. I think I texted her 2 or 3 times over the next couple of weeks. And this person still watches my Instagram stories. So maybe she'll watch this if it's on a clip and she'll be like, oh yeah, remember that time I flaked on a business and didn't answer?
I think at that point also, we were kind of like we were like ready, fire, aim, or ready, shoot, aim. Like we had already done a group intro and had a couple of students at this point too, when all this was like, first person doesn't work out for like natural causes. Second person,
natural causes.
Yeah, it's just not for them. Second person doesn't work out because they no show. At this point, like you've already done like a group intro and we have like 12 students.
Yeah. I did the group intro.
You did the group intro.
We did a workshop and like...
You sold like a lot. It was like $3,000 worth of martial arts lessons in a day.
Yeah. I remember I was like, we just needed something to happen. So we did a rec center because we didn't have a full-time building yet. We wanted money to be coming in before we had a lot of expenses. So I remember like, you know, I was like, all right, I'm just going to do it. I'll just get a bunch of money in the door as quickly as possible. I'll just do it. So yeah, we had like 10 to 12 students like a day. And I was like, oh, that's freaking awesome. We'll do a bunch of these. We'll be filled up immediately. It never really works that way.
I think that it didn't work because like, hey, that wasn't the dynamic that you didn't want to go be an enrollment director in another karate school. Like that wasn't your goal.
Yeah, exactly. If I was in that position, it'd be different.
Yeah,
right?
Obviously you knew how to do sales and like you knew how to do group intros, but that's not the goal here. The goal is like there's either like another partner or another employee doing it.
Yeah, you need leverage, right?
Exactly.
You need someone else to be doing it. Otherwise, you're gonna be stuck in the same position, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of like people who are like, nothing wrong with it, but you can like have a service job. Let's say you're like a plumber or electrician or whatever. You can make great money in that job, and unless you have other people working for you, you're always gonna be about the same income. Right. And you're always trading dollars for hours. And then anyway, so then I'm like looking for people frantically. Then we find someone and she has actually already a black belt.
From our schools.
I didn't even know about it until like much later. She might have told me and I forgot. And then she teamed up with your instructor and now they run that school. And we opened up in May of 2023 full time and they're doing okay so far. It's still like new. They're still going through a lot of the learning curve. But one of the things I loved about the temporary location that we had is that they made a lot of the mistakes when there like wasn't a lot of expenses going on. So first of all, we walk in the school and they're doing anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000 a month already, right? And before the doors even open. So now the doors open, there's rent that costs $5,000 a month. Well, the rent's like covered, right? And we were able to buy some equipment and you and I make investments in it. But those people, the people that we have now they have like a home base. Now it's like, okay, how do we make this really pretty and put all the things together? But now they have like their own space, which is a huge, huge thing for them. And they're going to have an opportunity to make like really good money because they invested their own money into it as well. So, and now like, I have another person who is just like you have another person who's a friend who's like one half of the equation who you're like, oh, well, I'm going to find a partner for this person and they'll open another school and then we'll find another partner. And like, that's how we'll grow. Leverage. Did you have anything you want to say about that?
I just think that it's a really awesome opportunity. I mean, I know for both of our people, I know for the guy, the student who I had, like this job will be more fulfilling. Like he's always talked to me and complained like, hey, the job I have, like that's always been his challenge. At every belt testing, we'll talk about what's a challenge you have coming up for the next semester and how can we like workshop it together. And he always says like, I'm just clocking in, clocking out. Like I love being here.
Yeah, that's how my person is right now too.
Yeah. So the fact that like he has a job that he actually like loves and feels fulfilled and like can put his like soul into and really make it his, and he's going to make more money than he ever has is like pretty awesome feeling.
And you get to do that for a friend, which is really cool. And it's a friend you've known for a long time.
I'm talking about at the Northern Liberty School.
Oh, that person. Okay. But you also have a friend who's like getting involved.
Yeah, exactly. I have a friend who I've known. We played football together freshman through senior year. We're really close. And he was kind of bouncing around, like trying to figure out what he wanted to do. And then he went to become a sub, like in the Council Rock School District, which is like where we grew up. And he's like, oh, I actually really like teaching. And before he went back there's a couple ways to do it, but before he went back to college to get his master's in teaching, or you can get like a certain cert, I was like, why don't you try this first? Because as both of my sister and her husband are teachers, like I know some of the BS you have to deal with when you're teaching of like parents and, the school district is terrified of lawsuits and you really can't reprimand kids the way that sometimes I think kids need to be reprimanded, not in like a negative way, but hey, if little Johnny's throwing his desk across the room, like little Johnny needs to go to the principal and potentially be suspended if he like hit someone.
Yeah.
And like, that's just not a thing. There's a lot of like tape that they can't go around.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, why don't you try this before you do that? And for him, I think it put together a lot of what he loves of like fitness, teaching, all that great stuff. So for me, it's still a little early, but I'm really excited for him that he's going to have the opportunity to like make great money more than he would as a teacher, have an awesome life and like combine a lot of the things that he likes to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like, what is it what's in it for the other person? Is it really going to help them? And if it is, and hey, there you go. Like, it's not like, oh, you want to make more money. I mean, is that part of it? Sure, of course. Who doesn't want to make more money? But it also like really needs to help that person, right? Like, we gave up equity in the business that we have together to the employees because we want them to make good money, right? This is self-serving in a way because like a little bit, of course, because they're going to stay longer and they'll run it better. But like, we want them to have a good lifestyle. We want them to make good money, like make an impact. And even if they didn't, we still have a revenue share system as an employee where they could also make really good money. Right?
Even in Action Karate in general, it'd be so easy in a lot of like organizations, it'd be easy for your brother and Miss Jackie, like his partner, to own all the equity, and there's just a lot of employees. Now, I think it would grow way slower. People would be less motivated. That's like another way to do it, but I don't think it incentivizes the individual and like helps them live an awesome life.
No, definitely not. Like, if you didn't see me buying a house or going on vacation, you probably wouldn't have a school. You'd be doing something else.
Yeah, 100%. If our instructors I imagine most schools make 40, their instructor gets paid like 30 to 40. There's no way I would have gone anywhere near this.
Yeah. And our instructors are ranges, but they'll make anywhere between, on the low end, I don't know what, $4,500, $5,000 a month to $7,000 or $8,000 a month, depending on like how well the school does. And that's a range. Plus, we give health insurance and retirement matching and like a lot of benefits that most martial arts school owners like never do. Right. And what's most important really is like, okay, what is in it for them? And it's going to be better for them. Like, even today, I was having a conversation with one of my head instructors, and he was talking about a student who is testing for black belt, and he needs to do his link in the chain project, which is like a social project we have them do to share the martial arts with their friends. And I'm like, okay, was the expectation clear of when it was due? Yes. Did you tell them they couldn't pass unless it's due? Yes. They 100% know that. Yes. So and he's like, yeah, but they're like late, and like, I want to help them. And I'm like, okay, what do you think letting him do it late is going to like help him or hurt him long term? She's like, well, long term it would hurt him. I'm like, okay, well then why do you want to do this? Like, why do you want to like let it be okay being late? He's like, I don't know, I just want to be nice. I'm like, I think you don't want to have the uncomfortable conversation. So you're not doing what's best for him. You're doing what's best for you by letting it go. And you need to do what's best for him. And if that means that he decides he thinks this is BS and he quits and doesn't get his black belt, he doesn't deserve it. Right. And I'll take that quit. I don't care. Yeah. Right. Because that's what's best for them. So I think if we think through that perspective and through that lens, you'll have a successful business that lasts for a really long time. So John, thank you so much. If you're a martial arts school owner and you want to learn how to grow your business through the Triangle Codex, through school programs, daycares, and strategic partnerships with other businesses, you can reach out to me at blackbeltbrenner1 on Instagram, or you can reach me on Matthew at doubleyourdojo.com. Or if you're like a young martial arts instructor somewhere else and like, hey, you just want like someone to talk to about opening up a school or how that works and the process, you can reach out to me or John. John, how do they find you?
Great question. I have no idea what my Instagram handle is. That's what I've been trying to do in my head this whole time.
I don't know your Instagram handle.
I just changed it. I believe it's John Cardinale too. But the best way to reach me would be on Facebook. John Cardinale. It's Cardinal with an E at the end. You'll see a picture of me in a karate uniform. That'd be definitely the best way to reach me.
Cool. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.